Welcome to CreepyTalks, where hidden fears come alive through chilling horror tales. Dare to listen as every story pulls you deeper into the darkness. Story 1. The Silence Behind the Kitchen Door. She worked in the house for 6 months. On the 7th month, the house realized she was never alive. People say every house has a sound: floorboards creaking, pipes breathing, walls settling. But the house on Willow Crescent had silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that presses against your ears, as if something is listening. When Mr. and Mrs. Carter hired the housemaid, she arrived on a rainy Monday morning. No umbrella, no luggage, just a small cloth bag and eyes that never blinked too often. Her name was Eliza. She spoke softly, almost whispering, as if afraid of waking something up. Mrs. Carter noticed it immediately, but dismissed it. Good maids were hard to find, and Eliza came recommended through an old agency record, handwritten, yellowed, almost forgotten. The first strange thing happened on her 3rd day. Mrs. Carter woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. She assumed Eliza was cleaning late again. The girl worked odd hours, never complained, never asked for days off. But when Mrs. Carter reached the kitchen, the lights were off. The dishes were stacked neatly, bone dry, cold, and Eliza was standing in the corner, facing the wall. Mrs. Carter laughed nervously and asked, "Eliza, what are you doing?" Slowly, Eliza turned her head, not her body, just her head. "I heard footsteps," she said. Mrs. Carter frowned. "From where?" "From inside the walls." Mrs. Carter didn't sleep after that. Weeks passed and the Carters began noticing things that felt wrong. Eliza never ate with them. She claimed she ate earlier or later or not at all. The refrigerator remained untouched at night. No leftovers went missing. No plates were used. Yet every morning the kitchen smelled of freshly cooked food. Mr. Carter once joked, "Maybe she survives on air." Eliza didn't smile. She simply said, "I don't need much." Another thing, no one ever heard her footsteps, not on the stairs, not in the hallway. She appeared silently, suddenly, like she had always been standing there. And then there were the mirrors. Every mirror in the house had been cleaned perfectly, except one. The small mirror near the kitchen door. Eliza never touched it. Mrs. Carter asked her once why. Eliza's answer was quiet but sharp. "Some reflections don't belong to the living." The first real incident happened when the Carters hosted a dinner party. Friends filled the house with laughter, music, wine. For the first time, the silence was broken. Eliza served everyone calmly, efficiently. Guests complimented her politeness, but mentioned something unsettling. She never made eye contact. At exactly 9:47 p.m., the power went out. Darkness swallowed the house. Someone screamed. When the lights returned, one of the guests, Mrs. Holloway, was sitting on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. "She stood behind me," she cried. "The maid. She whispered my dead sister's name." Everyone laughed it off. Nerves, alcohol, imagination. Eliza was nowhere to be seen. Later that night, Mrs. Carter found her standing outside the kitchen door, staring at the small mirror. "What did you whisper to Mrs. Holloway?" she demanded. Eliza replied, "She asked who followed her home." Mrs. Carter felt her stomach drop. Things escalated quickly after that. The Carter's son, Daniel, age 9, started talking in his sleep. He whispered about a woman who sat at the foot of his bed. "Eliza keeps the other ones away," he murmured one night. "What other ones?" Mrs. Carter asked, terrified. "The ones who knock from inside the closet." Mrs. Carter rushed to Eliza the next morning. "Have you been in my son's room at night?" Eliza nodded. "Yes," Mrs. Carter snapped. "You are not allowed." "They try to take him," Eliza interrupted calmly. Children are easier. That was the first time Mr. Carter demanded they fire her. But when they tried, Eliza simply said, "I can't leave yet." That night, the walls started knocking. Not pipes, not wood, knuckles from the inside. At 2:03 a.m., the kitchen door slammed shut on its own. Mrs. Carter ran downstairs and found Eliza standing barefoot on the cold tiles, blood dripping from her nose. "They're angry," Eliza said. "What are they?" Mr. Carter shouted. Eliza looked at them both. "Former staff." The temperature dropped suddenly. Frost formed on the kitchen window. The knocking grew louder, rhythmic, desperate. Eliza stepped toward the small mirror and finally touched it. The reflection moved before she did. The mirror cracked. Screams erupted from the walls. And then, silence. The next morning, Eliza was gone. No note, no belongings. The cloth bag remained, empty. The house felt lighter, warmer, relieved. Until Mrs. Carter decided to research the agency record. She found a death certificate dated 1979. Cause of death, severe head trauma. Occupation, housemaid. Location, Willow Crescent. Attached was a photograph. Eliza, same face, same eyes. Mrs. Carter dropped the file. Behind her, the kitchen door slowly creaked open, and for the first time since Eliza left, footsteps were heard. Story 2. She was never alone in the house. The maid didn't return, but something else learned her job very well. After Eliza disappeared, the Carters tried to convince themselves that everything would go back to normal. It didn't. The house stopped knocking, yes, but it started watching. Mrs. Carter noticed it first. That feeling you get when you turn off a light and walk upstairs, certain someone is behind you. She felt it every night. Every corner of the house felt occupied, as if invisible furniture had been moved to make space for something unseen. Daniel stopped talking about Eliza. That scared her more than anything. Children don't forget protectors easily. The second maid arrived 2 weeks later. Her name was Martha, middle-aged, practical, loud in a comforting way. She laughed often and spoke bluntly. The house seemed to resist her presence. Doors stuck, drawers jammed. The small mirror near the kitchen door cracked further on its own. Spiderweb fractures spreading overnight. On Martha's first day, she asked, "Why does this place feel cold even when the heater's on?" Mrs. Carter lied. "Old pipes." That night, Martha screamed. They found her in the laundry room staring at the washing machine, pale and trembling. "It called me," she whispered. "What called you?" Mr. Carter asked. "The machine," she said. "It said she doesn't like replacements." Martha quit the next morning. Things worsened rapidly after that. Plates fell from shelves with no explanation. Doors slammed only when Daniel walked past them. And the kitchen, always the kitchen, smelled of iron and burned oil after midnight. Mrs. Carter began dreaming of Eliza. Not violent dreams, routine ones. Eliza folding laundry. Eliza wiping the counter. Eliza standing behind Mrs. Carter in the mirror, but never reflected. In every dream, Eliza whispered the same sentence. "They don't stay quiet forever." One night, Mrs. Carter woke up choking, hands around her throat, invisible, freezing hands. She struggled, gasping, until suddenly the pressure vanished. The bedroom door was open. On the wall, written in something dark and sticky, were 3 words. She kept order. Mr. Carter wanted to leave the house immediately, but the realtor refused to list it. "Too many complaints," he said. "Neighbors hear screaming. No one lives there long." Mrs. Carter asked, "Who lived here before us?" The realtor hesitated. "Staff housing," he admitted. "Rotating help. High turnover." "How high?" "None stayed longer than a year." Mrs. Carter felt sick. Daniel started sleepwalking. Every night at exactly 3:12 a.m., the same time Mrs. Carter first heard Eliza in the kitchen. He walked downstairs silently and stood in front of the small mirror. Mrs. Carter followed him one night and watched in horror as Daniel whispered, "She says you're messy." Mrs. Carter grabbed him and shook him awake. "Who says that?" Daniel blinked, confused. "The maid," he said. "The one with the broken neck." Mrs. Carter screamed. Desperate, the Carters called a paranormal investigator. His name was Edwin Hale. Calm, skeptical, methodical. He set up cameras, audio recorders, temperature sensors. "This house isn't haunted," he said confidently. "It's occupied." That sentence made Mrs. Carter's blood run cold. "What's the difference?" she asked. "A haunting is a memory," Edwin replied. "An occupation is active." That night, every sensor malfunctioned. Cameras recorded hours of empty rooms, except one. The kitchen camera showed Eliza, standing perfectly still, facing the mirror. At 3:12 a.m., she turned and smiled. Edwin watched the footage in silence. "She was a regulator," he said finally. "A what?" "Some spirits don't haunt," he explained. "They maintain. Houses like this attract things. She kept them contained." Mr. Carter shouted, "Contained from what?" Edwin didn't answer immediately. Then the knocking started again. Not from the walls this time. From the floor. From below the house. The basement door, always locked, creaked open. A smell poured out. Rot. Mold. Something ancient. Edwin went down first. The basement wasn't empty. It was lined with names carved into the concrete. Hundreds of them. Dates, occupations, all staff, all ending with the same word. Replaced. Edwin turned pale. "They didn't fire her," he whispered. "They buried her." Mrs. Carter's knees buckled. "Who?" "The house," Edwin said. "Or what's bound to it." The temperature dropped violently. Lights exploded. The knocking turned into screaming. From the basement walls, shapes pressed outward. Faces, hands, mouths opening and closing in agony. "They were careless," Edwin shouted. "She cleaned their mess. When she died, nothing stopped them." The mirror upstairs shattered completely. A voice echoed through the house. Calm, familiar. "You let it get dirty." Eliza stood at the top of the basement stairs. Her neck hung at an unnatural angle. Her eyes were empty. "You replaced me," she said softly. Mrs. Carter fell to her knees. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "Please." Eliza tilted her head. "I wasn't finished." The house screamed. Walls cracked. The floor split open. Darkness surged upward like a tide. Edwin grabbed Daniel and shoved him toward the door. "Run!" As they escaped, Mrs. Carter looked back. Eliza was smiling again, calm, at peace, as the house collapsed inward, swallowing itself whole. The Carters survived. The house was condemned. Official cause, structural failure. No bodies were recovered. Years later, Mrs. Carter still cleans obsessively. Every surface, every corner. Because sometimes when she leaves a room messy, she hears soft footsteps behind her and a whisper. "I kept order once. Now it's your turn." Story 3. The Maid Who Never Blinked. She never asked for payment, and once she entered the house, no one remembered hiring her. The house stood alone at the edge of the town, where streetlights stopped working and phone signals quietly died. It had been vacant for 7 years. When the Henderson family moved in, the neighbors watched from behind their curtains, not with curiosity, but with relief. A lived-in house meant whatever was inside might finally stay quiet. Mrs. Henderson noticed the maid on the second morning. She was standing in the hallway, still, waiting. Slim build, pale skin, dark uniform that looked decades old. Her hands were folded neatly, fingers overlapping with unnatural precision. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Henderson said, startled. "Who are you?" The maid bowed her head slightly. "I take care of the house," she said. Her voice was flat, not cold, empty. Mrs. Henderson assumed her husband had hired her. These things happened during stressful moves. "What's your name?" she asked. The maid paused, then said, "You may call me Anne." Anne worked flawlessly. Too flawlessly. Every surface shined unnaturally fast. Beds were made before anyone left them. Spills vanished before they finished dripping. But there was something wrong with her face. She never blinked. Not once. Mrs. Henderson tested it. She spoke loudly, clapped, slammed doors. Anne's eyes stayed open, unmoving, glassy, unbothered. Their daughter Lucy, age 6, noticed something else. "She watches the corners," Lucy whispered one night. "What corners?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "The ones where the dark folds," Lucy said. "She tells it to behave." Anne never entered Lucy's room without permission, but Lucy woke up every morning to find her toys perfectly aligned, facing the same direction, toward the closet. One night Lucy asked, "Anne, do you sleep?" Anne tilted her head. "I rest when the house rests," she replied. "What about blinking?" Anne smiled. "I already saw everything," she said. The first incident happened on the 5th night. Mr. Henderson heard water running long after midnight. He went downstairs and found Anne in the kitchen, scrubbing the floor with bare hands. The tiles were red. "Anne," he shouted, "what are you doing?" She looked up slowly. "Something spilled," she said. Mr. Henderson looked around. There was no cut, no broken glass, only the smell. Iron, blood. But by morning the floor was spotless. Anne stood in the hallway again, waiting. Mrs. Henderson tried to find the employment records. There were none, no agency, no contract, no payment history. When she asked Anne directly, Anne answered calmly, "I was already here." That night, Mrs. Henderson dreamed of a woman kneeling on the same kitchen floor, scrubbing endlessly while shadows crawled down the walls toward her. The woman never blinked. The house changed with Anne's presence. Rooms felt smaller, hallways stretched longer, doors took longer to close, as if resisting, and the blinking stopped. First Lucy, then Mr. Henderson. They would stare for long moments, eyes dry, unresponsive. Anne would gently remind them, "Stillness keeps it calm." Mrs. Henderson started blinking excessively, terrified of forgetting how. On the 9th night, Lucy disappeared. She wasn't missing. She was stored. Mrs. Henderson found her standing inside the hallway closet, eyes open, arms at her sides. "Lucy!" she screamed. Lucy didn't respond. Anne stood behind them. "She was loud," Anne said. "The house doesn't like loud." Mrs. Henderson grabbed her daughter. "You don't get to decide that." Anne stepped closer. Her eyes widened impossibly. "I do," she said. "That's why I was kept." The truth surfaced violently. At 3:33 a.m., the walls began breathing, literally expanding and contracting. From inside the plaster, shapes pushed outward, eyes forming, blinking desperately. Anne moved calmly through the chaos, touching walls, whispering commands. "Back, quiet, obey." The eyes retreated. Mr. Henderson collapsed. "What is she?" he screamed. Anne turned to him. "I'm what stopped it from looking back." Mrs. Henderson remembered something then. The neighbors, their relief, the way no one asked questions. She confronted Anne. "What happened to the last family?" Anne was silent for a long time. Then she said, "They stopped watching." The lights cut out. In the darkness, blinking sounds filled the house. Wet, rapid, frantic. Something moved. Fast. Too fast. Anne stood perfectly still. "Do not look away," she commanded. Mrs. Henderson's eyes burned. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't blink. Because when Mr. Henderson blinked, he vanished. No scream, no sound, just gone. Anne sighed. "One at a time," she murmured. "That's how it learns." Mrs. Henderson grabbed Lucy and ran. Anne didn't stop her. She simply said, "You won't manage long." And she was right. Outside the house, the world felt wrong. Empty, flat. Lucy blinked and screamed. Behind them, the house groaned in satisfaction. Anne watched from the doorway, waiting. The Hendersons were found days later on the highway. Catatonic, eyes red, unblinking. Lucy never spoke again. The house gained a new family 6 months later, and on the second morning, they noticed the maid standing in the hallway, still waiting. Story 4. The laundry that never dried. The clothes were warm. No one in the house remembered wearing them. The washing machine started on its own at 2:14 a.m. That was the first sign something was wrong. Mrs. Wallace woke to the low rhythmic thumping echoing through the house like a heartbeat. Her husband slept beside her, unmoving. The sound wasn't loud, but it was persistent, patient, as if it knew someone would eventually listen. She followed the noise downstairs. The laundry room light was on. Inside, the machine churned slowly, filled with clothes she didn't recognize. Small shirts, delicate fabric, child-sized socks, still warm, still wet. Mrs. Wallace stood frozen. Her daughter had moved out 5 years ago. They hired the maid 2 weeks earlier. Her name was Ruth. She was older than the others, late 50s, maybe early 60s, with gray hair always tied back and eyes permanently lowered. She spoke very little, but she worked constantly. Laundry was her obsession. She washed clothes daily, even when no one had worn anything new. When Mrs. Wallace once laughed and said, "Ruth, we're running out of dirty clothes," Ruth replied without looking up, "They'll come." The Wallaces assumed grief explained it. Ruth had mentioned losing children long ago. The way she folded clothes, careful, reverent, felt like mourning, not madness. But there were rules. Ruth never allowed anyone else to do the laundry. Never. When Mr. Wallace tried once, she stood silently in the doorway until he stepped away. "You'll mix them," she said. "Mix what?" he asked. Ruth didn't answer. The neighbors avoided the Wallace's house, not openly, but subtly. One woman finally said, "Your maid. She's been here before." Mrs. Wallace frowned. "We just moved in." The woman swallowed. "That's what the other said too." More clothes appeared. Every morning, neatly folded stacks waited on the laundry table. Always clean, always warm, always slightly damp. Some were stained, brown, rust-colored, dark. Mrs. Wallace noticed that some garments were stitched with names on the inside collar. Names she didn't recognize. Until one morning she found a shirt labeled Emily, her daughter's name. Her hands shook. She called Emily immediately. Emily answered, alive, confused. "Mom, I haven't been home in years." Mrs. Wallace hung up and vomited. That night she dreamed of children standing in the laundry room, naked and shivering, waiting as Ruth scrubbed their clothes violently. "Still dirty," Ruth whispered. "You didn't behave." The children never cried. They just stared. Mr. Wallace started hearing breathing in the laundry room, slow, wet, like lungs struggling. When he opened the door one night, Ruth was hand-washing clothes in the sink. Her hands were raw, bleeding. The water was red. "You're hurting yourself," he said. Ruth smiled faintly. "They hurt worse," she replied. The truth emerged through the house itself. Pipes clogged with hair, vents clogged with fabric fibers. Behind the dryer, Mrs. Wallace found something folded carefully. Skin, human skin, cleaned, pressed. Mrs. Wallace screamed. Ruth appeared instantly. "You weren't supposed to unfold that," she said. Ruth finally spoke that night. She told them everything. This house used to be an unofficial home. Families sent children here they didn't want. Unregistered, uncounted. Ruth was hired to clean, to wash, to erase. They came dirty, she said, in every way. The house learned from it, learned how to keep them. When the children disappeared, the house kept what it could. Stains, smells, memories. And Ruth stayed behind, because someone had to keep washing. "You're killing them," Mrs. Wallace whispered. Ruth shook her head. "No," she said, "I'm keeping them from smelling." The washing machine roared to life upstairs. Too loud, too full. Something banged from inside, hard, desperate. The power went out. In the darkness, the laundry room door slammed shut, locked, from the inside. Mrs. Wallace screamed for Ruth. Ruth's voice came calmly through the door. "They're ready to be folded." The banging inside the machine turned into screaming, childish, high-pitched. Mrs. Wallace tried to open the door. It wouldn't budge. The screaming stopped suddenly. Silence. Then, a ding, cycle complete. The door opened. Ruth stood smiling. Behind her, fresh stacks of laundry, perfectly folded, dry, warm. Mrs. Wallace noticed something horrifying. The house felt lighter, satisfied, like it had eaten. The Wallaces fled that night. They left everything. The house was condemned weeks later after a fire. Cause unknown. Bodies? None found. Only ash and folded clothing. Years later, at a donation center, a woman unfolded a child's sweater. Still warm, still damp. Inside the collar, stitched carefully, "Welcome home." And somewhere far away, a washing machine started on its own. Story 5, The House That Ate With Us. Every meal brought the family closer, not to each other, but to the house. The first dinner tasted better than it should have. Mrs. Grant noticed it immediately. The soup was richer, warmer, almost comforting in a way that made her chest ache. Her husband smiled mid-spoonful, eyes briefly closing, as if remembering something pleasant he couldn't name. Their new maid, Clara, stood silently near the kitchen door. She never sat, never ate, never spoke unless spoken to. "That's delicious," Mrs. Grant said politely. Clara nodded once. "The house prefers when you finish everything," she replied. They had hired Clara the same day they moved in. She was already there when the realtor unlocked the door. "I take care of meals," she said calmly, as if continuing a conversation they had already agreed to. She wore a simple apron, no stains, no wrinkles. Her hands were always warm, too warm. By the third day, the Grants realized something strange. They weren't getting hungry. Breakfast came whether they asked or not. Lunch appeared exactly when they thought about it. Dinner waited steaming on the table even when Clara hadn't been seen cooking. And yet, the refrigerator was always full. Too full. Food they didn't remember buying. Mrs. Grant found jars of preserves labeled with dates from decade ago. Still fresh. Still warm. Their son Oliver, aged 10, was the first to say it out loud. "The house eats too," he said between bites. Mrs. Grant laughed nervously. "Houses don't eat." Oliver frowned. "Then why does it make noise when we chew?" That night after dinner, the walls creaked rhythmically, like swallowing. Clara enforced rules. No food wasted, no meals skipped, no eating outside the house. When Mr. Grant brought home takeout one evening, Clara calmly threw it away. "The house doesn't like unfamiliar tastes," she said. Mr. Grant snapped, "It's just a house." Clara met his eyes for the first time. "And you're just guess," she replied. People stopped visiting. Friends complained of nausea, dizziness, sudden grief. One guest excused herself to the bathroom and never came back out. They found her standing in the hallway, pale, trembling. "I remember dying here," she whispered. She refused to explain further. Mrs. Grant began noticing changes. Her wedding ring felt tighter. Her favorite dress no longer fit. Not because she gained weight, but because she felt heavier, like something had settled inside her. Memories surfaced during meals. Not hers. A woman crying at the table, a man choking silently, a child hiding food in his pockets. Clara watched them eat with quiet approval. "She's remembering you," Clara said one night. Mrs. Grant put down her fork. "Who?" "The house." Oliver stopped eating. He pushed food around his plate, pale and withdrawn. "I don't want it inside me," he whispered. That night the house groaned loudly. Pipes burst, doors slammed. The dining table cracked down the middle. Clara stood over Oliver's bed. "You must eat," she said softly. Oliver shook his head. "I can hear them screaming when I swallow." Clara's expression hardened. "They were grateful," she said. "They became part of something permanent." Mr. Grant tried to leave. He packed a bag quietly at dawn. The front door wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't break. The house tightened. The walls pressed inward slightly, breathing faster. Clara appeared. "You can't leave hungry," she said. Mr. Grant screamed. At dinner that night, there was an extra plate. Mrs. Grant didn't ask what was being served. She already knew. The meat was tender, familiar. She cried as she chewed. The house sighed contentedly. Oliver vanished the next morning. His room was spotless, his bed made. A single chair added to the dining table. Mrs. Grant screamed until her throat bled. Clara placed a hand on her shoulder. "He feeds it better this way," she said. Mrs. Grant tried to starve herself. 3 days without eating. On the 4th day, the house forced her mouth open. Not physically, emotionally. Memories poured into her. Hunger that wasn't hers. Loneliness layered over decades. She ate. She forgot resisting. The final meal was quiet. Just Mrs. Grant and Clara. The table stretched longer than before. Dozens of empty chairs lined it. The walls pulsed gently. "You did well," Clara said. Mrs. Grant looked down at her hands. They were becoming translucent. "What happens now?" she asked. Clara smiled faintly. "You stay," she said. "I move on." Mrs. Grant felt herself sinking into the chair, into the table, into the floor. Her last thought wasn't fear. It was fullness. Months later, the house welcomed a new family. Warm lights, a full refrigerator, a quiet maid standing near the kitchen door. Her name was Clara, and dinner was already ready. Story 6, The Maid Who Counted Breaths. Everyone slept better after she arrived. That should have been the warning. The maid insisted on one rule the moment she was hired. No one sleeps alone. Her name was Miriam, and she said it with a calm certainty that made arguing feel childish. She was thin, middle-aged, with soft hands and a voice that never rose or fell. She smiled gently, like a nurse in a long-term ward. The Palmer family laughed it off at first. "Everyone has their quirks," Mr. Palmer said. Miriam smiled wider. "This one keeps you alive," she replied. The Palmers had moved into the house after a string of bad nights. Nightmares, insomnia, waking breathless. The house felt heavy after dark, like the air thickened once the sun went down. Miriam came with the house. The landlord never mentioned her, but she was already unpacking cleaning supplies when the family arrived. "She helps people rest," the landlord said quickly. You'll see. That night, everyone slept deeply. Too deeply. Mrs. Palmer woke once, briefly, to the sound of whispering. Numbers. Soft. Steady. 21, 22, 23. She tried to move. She couldn't. At the foot of the bed, Miriam sat perfectly still, eyes focused on Mrs. Palmer's chest. Good, Miriam whispered. Consistent. Mrs. Palmer woke the next morning refreshed, terrified, and unable to explain why. Miriam established routines. Beds had to be positioned precisely, doors left slightly open, lights off completely. She insisted on checking everyone before sleep, a hand on the chest, an ear near the mouth, a quiet count under her breath. When Mr. Palmer joked, "What happens if we break the rule?" Miriam answered without humor, "Then the house breathes instead." The first death happened peacefully. Their elderly neighbor, Mr. Cole, came over one evening complaining of chest pain. They offered him the guest room. Miriam objected. "He must not sleep alone," she said. They ignored her. In the morning, Mr. Cole was dead in bed. No struggle, no marks. Just a look of shock frozen on his face. The coroner ruled it natural causes. Miriam washed the sheets herself. "They always stop between breaths," she murmured. After that, the Palmers obeyed. The children shared a room again. Mr. and Mrs. Palmer never slept apart. If someone woke at night, Miriam appeared silently to count again. 31, 32, always stopping at 33, never past it. Mrs. Palmer asked once, "Why 33?" Miriam paused. "That's when it listens," she said. The house changed at night. Walls pulsed faintly. Floorboards rose and fell, like lungs. When everyone slept together, the house was quiet. When someone stayed awake too long, the pipes rattled violently. The house hated uneven breathing. Their daughter Hannah, age 8, started waking up crying. "She's standing too close," Hannah whispered. "Who?" Mrs. Palmer asked. "The counting lady," Hannah said. "She doesn't blink when I pretend to stop." Mrs. Palmer confronted Miriam. "Are you watching them all night?" Miriam nodded. "Someone must," she said. "Children forget to breathe correctly." One night, Mr. Palmer drank too much. He passed out on the couch, alone. Miriam froze when she found him. "No," she whispered urgently. She dragged him toward the bedroom, counting frantically. 1, 2, 3. The house groaned. The walls creaked inward. Mr. Palmer stopped breathing at 17. Miriam screamed, a sound no one had ever heard her make. The house exhaled. The children woke screaming. Mr. Palmer never did. His face was peaceful, almost relieved. Miriam rocked back and forth beside the body. "I was late," she whispered. "I was late again." Mrs. Palmer demanded answers. Miriam finally told the truth. The house had been built over a place where people suffocated, a quarantine ward, a sealed refuge, a mass grave of sleepers who never woke. Their final breaths soaked into the foundation. The house learned to breathe from them, but it needed rhythm, structure. Miriam was hired decades ago to watch patients sleep, to count. When the ward closed, the house kept her, because someone had to make sure breathing continued. "You let it eat him," Mrs. Palmer sobbed. Miriam shook her head. "No," she said softly. "I stopped it from eating all of you." That night, Miriam refused to leave the children's room. She sat between the beds, counting. Hannah pretended to sleep. She held her breath, just for a moment. The walls screamed. Miriam lunged forward. "Breathe," she cried. Too late. The room went silent. The Palmers fled the house the next morning. They left Miriam behind. She didn't follow. She sat on the floor, counting alone. 31, 32. The house breathed with her. Weeks later, new tenants moved in, complained of nightmares, of waking breathless. The landlord reassured them. "There's help," he said. That night, Miriam knocked gently on their bedroom door. "No one sleeps alone," she said kindly, "and I'll be counting." Story 7. The Maid Who Locked the Doors. Every door in the house could be opened, except the one she closed herself. The first thing the maid did was take the keys, all of them, front door, back door, storage rooms, even the small lock beneath the staircase that the family hadn't noticed before. She pointed it out. Her name was Evelyn. She didn't ask for permission. She simply held out her hand and said, "The house prefers consistency." Mr. Rowe hesitated. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. The locks clicked on their own. He handed over the keys. The Rowe family had moved in after a foreclosure. The price was suspiciously low. The realtor avoided eye contact and rushed the paperwork. "There's a caretaker," he said quickly. "She helps with maintenance." That was Evelyn. She was already inside when they arrived, standing in the hallway, facing a closed door. Evelyn enforced strict rules. No locked doors except hers. No opening doors after midnight. No asking what's behind closed rooms. "Some spaces," she said calmly, "are not meant to be understood." Their teenage son, Lucas, immediately hated her. "You can't just lock parts of our house," he snapped. Evelyn smiled politely. "I can," she said, "and I did." The locked doors appeared gradually. First the storage room, then the study, then a bathroom no one used. Each time Evelyn locked them from the inside. No keyhole, no handle movement, just sealed. When Mrs. Rowe asked what was inside, Evelyn replied, "Stillness." The noises started soon after, scratching, from behind the locked doors, slow at first, then more deliberate, as if something was learning where the wood was weakest. Lucas pressed his ear to the study door one night. He heard breathing, multiple breaths, out of sync. Evelyn appeared instantly. "You shouldn't listen," she said. "What's in there?" Lucas demanded. Evelyn's smile faded. "What curiosity wakes up?" she replied. Mr. Rowe tried to break one door open, a hammer, a crowbar. The wood didn't splinter, it flexed, like muscle. The door pulsed under the impact. The house groaned. Evelyn placed her hand on the door. "It's uncomfortable when you do that," she said softly. Mr. Rowe dropped the crowbar. His nose started bleeding. At night, Evelyn walked the halls, locking, unlocking, relocking, always from the inside. The sound of keys echoed through the house long after she passed. Mrs. Rowe woke one night to find Evelyn standing at the foot of the bed. "You left a door open?" Evelyn whispered. Mrs. Rowe looked. The bedroom door was wide open. She was sure she closed it. Evelyn shut it gently, locked it, from the inside. They realized something horrifying on the 5th night. The locked rooms were moving. The study door had shifted closer to the stairs. The bathroom door was now at the end of a different hallway. The house was rearranging itself, around the doors, keeping them central, important. Lucas mapped the house on paper. By morning, the map was wrong. "What happens if someone opens one?" Lucas asked at dinner. Evelyn paused her cleaning. Her eyes darkened. "Then the house learns something new," she said, "and it gets hungrier." Mrs. Rowe lost her appetite. The first punishment came quietly. Mrs. Rowe opened the linen closet, a door Evelyn had never locked. Inside, instead of towels, was a narrow hallway. Breathing. The door slammed shut behind her. She screamed. The walls pressed inward, ribs cracking. The air thinned. Then suddenly, the door opened. Mrs. Rowe collapsed out, gasping. Evelyn stood over her. "You wandered," she said gently. That was kind. That night, Evelyn locked the children's room from the inside. Lucas rattled the handle. Open it! You've been asking questions, Evelyn replied calmly. The house noticed. The scratching behind the walls grew louder, closer. Something sniffed. Mr. Rose snapped. He tackled Evelyn near the front door. They struggled. For the first time, she looked afraid. Not of him, of the house. The walls shuddered violently. Doors slammed shut throughout the house. Every lock turned at once. Evelyn screamed. You don't force exits, she cried. The floor split open. Something reached up. Hands. Too many. Evelyn was dragged downward, screaming apologies. I kept them closed, she begged. I kept them contained. The house swallowed her. Silence followed. The locks fell open. Every door unlocked at once. The Rose ran. They didn't stop running. Weeks later, the house stood empty again. Doors wide open. Waiting. Then someone new arrived. A young woman. She stepped inside and paused. The doors slammed shut behind her. Locks clicked. She smiled faintly, picked up the keys from the hallway table, and whispered, I'll keep them closed this time. Story 8. The maid who cleaned the mirrors. The mirrors were spotless. That's how they knew someone was missing. The maid cleaned mirrors every morning, not casually, not quickly, with ritualistic patience. Her name was Lydia, and she treated reflections the way priests treat altars. Soft cloth, steady breathing, eyes lowered until the very last moment. Mirrors remember, she said the first day. That's why they must be wiped carefully. The Brennan family laughed politely. They stopped laughing after the first face disappeared. The house had mirrors everywhere. Hallway, bathroom, guest room. Even one mounted awkwardly at the end of the stairs, angled so you could see yourself descending long before you reached it. Lydia insisted on keeping them uncovered. No cloths, she warned. No cracks. No turning them to the wall. Mrs. Brennan asked, why? Lydia smiled thinly. Because then they look for you instead. The first change was subtle. Mr. Brennan noticed his reflection blinked half a second late. He rubbed his eyes. It corrected itself. He didn't mention it. The second change was worse. Their son, Aaron, age 14, waved at his reflection one morning. It didn't wave back. It just stared. Aaron screamed. Lydia arrived instantly, wiping the mirror in slow circles. It was only curious, she said. You shouldn't startle them. That night, Mrs. Brennan dreamed of standing in the bathroom, watching herself brush her teeth. Only the woman in the mirror kept brushing long after Mrs. Brennan stopped, smiling wider each stroke. When Mrs. Brennan woke, her gums were bleeding. The mirror was fogged. Finger marks pressed outward from the inside. Lydia explained the rule at breakfast. No one stares too long, she said calmly, and no one cleans mirrors but me. Mr. Brennan scoffed. They're just reflections. Lydia met his gaze. Then why do they age when you don't? She asked. No one spoke after that. Aaron stopped using mirrors. He covered his bedroom one with a blanket. The house did not like that. Cracks formed in the walls around it. Whispering began at night. Not voices. Breathing. Matching his own. Lydia removed the blanket while Aaron slept. You made it lonely, she whispered to the glass. The reflection smiled. The first disappearance happened on a Tuesday. Mrs. Brennan's sister, Claire, visited for lunch. She went to wash her hands. She never came back. They found the bathroom empty. No struggle, no blood, just the mirror. Perfectly clean. Too clean. Where Claire's reflection should have been, there was nothing. Not emptiness. Depth. Like a hallway receding inward. Lydia closed the door gently. She stayed, she said. Panic set in. Mr. Brennan smashed one mirror with a chair. The glass didn't shatter. It screamed. A high, piercing shriek that sent him to his knees, bleeding from the ears. Lydia slapped the chair from his hands. "You don't break windows when something is looking through them," she hissed. The mirror healed. Slowly. Like skin knitting. Lydia finally told them the truth. The house had been built over a place where people were watched. Interrogation rooms, observation wards, rooms with one-way glass. People learned to survive by controlling their faces, by practicing expressions, by leaving parts of themselves behind in reflections. Over time, the reflections stayed. The bodies left. The house filled with watchers who had never been allowed to look away. "They get lonely," Lydia said. "They want turns." At night, reflection stepped closer, not out, closer to the glass, pressing faces forward. Aaron woke screaming when his reflection whispered, "I can finish your days better than you." Mrs. Brennan noticed her reflection, sometimes moved while she stood still, fixing her hair, adjusting posture, practicing. Lydia began cleaning mirrors more often, twice a day, then 3 times. Her hands shook. "You're losing control," Mrs. Brennan said. Lydia nodded. "They're impatient," she admitted. "Too many faces, not enough exits." Mr. Brennan vanished next, 1 second brushing his teeth, the next, gone. The mirror was fogged, a handprint smeared outward. Lydia sank to the floor. "They chose him," she whispered. "He watched himself too often." Mrs. Brennan screamed. The house echoed it back, perfectly, in her own voice. Aaron refused to look at any reflection. He walked with his head down, covered his eyes during showers. Still at night, he felt fingers tracing his face, learning, measuring. Lydia stood guard outside his room, counting breaths, whispering apologies. "I can't stop them forever," she sobbed. The final night came quietly. All the mirrors fogged at once. The house felt attentive. Lydia gathered the family in the hallway. "One of you must stay," she said. "That's the balance." Mrs. Brennan shook her head violently. "No!" Aaron screamed. "I'll go," Lydia said. She stood before the stairway mirror, smoothed her uniform. For the first time, she looked directly at her reflection. It smiled with relief. "I kept you clean," Lydia whispered. "Be gentle." The glass rippled, pulled her in. Her scream echoed from every mirror at once. Then silence. Morning came. The mirrors were calm. Normal. Mrs. Brennan and Aaron fled the house. They never looked back. Years later, in a new home, Aaron noticed something. His reflection blinked late, smiled wider than he felt, and whispered softly, "She kept us clean once. Now it's your turn to look." Story 9, The Maid Who Prepared the House. The maid arrived the day before the funeral. The problem was, no one in the house was dead yet. The maid's name was Agnes. She rang the doorbell at exactly 6 p.m., just as the sun dipped low enough to stain the windows amber. She wore black, not a uniform, not mourning clothes, but something in between. Practical, final. Mrs. Holt opened the door and immediately felt it. That strange tightening in the chest, the certainty that something irreversible had just begun. "I'm here to prepare the house," Agnes said calmly. Mrs. Holt frowned. "Prepare it for what?" Agnes smiled gently. "For quiet." The Holts had just moved in. The house was old but intact. Too intact. No dust, no smell of abandonment. As if it had been waiting with held breath. They hadn't hired a maid. Mr. Holt protested, but Agnes stepped inside anyway. "The house already accepted me," she said. "That's usually the longest part." The front door closed behind her. It locked itself. Agnes began immediately. She opened windows, then closed them again, counting under her breath. She removed photographs from the walls and placed them face down. She loosened light bulbs just enough to flicker. Mrs. Holt watched, unsettled. "Why are you doing that?" she asked. Agnes answered without stopping. "So it doesn't recognize you too clearly." That night, Agnes cooked dinner. No one was hungry. Still, she served full plates. "It's rude not to eat on the first night," she said. "The house mistakes that for defiance." Their son Matthew, age 12, whispered, "She smells like hospitals." Agnes paused. "That's where houses learn patience," she replied. After dinner, Agnes began measuring rooms, not with tools, with steps, counting softly as she crossed each space, touching walls, pressing her ear to them, nodding as if confirming a diagnosis. "This one goes first," she murmured in the hallway. Mrs. Holt's stomach twisted. "What do you mean, goes first?" Agnes looked surprised. "Oh," she said, "you haven't noticed yet." The first sign came at 11:47 p.m. The clocks stopped. Every one of them. Phones, microwaves, wristwatches. Time froze at the same minute. Agnes sat at the dining table, polishing silverware that hadn't been used. "When the house is ready," she explained, "time stops being useful." That night, Mr. Holt dreamed he was lying on the living room floor, unable to move, while Agnes covered the furniture with white sheets. When he woke, the sheets were there. Agnes forbade sleeping in bedrooms. "Beds are for after," she said. They slept in the living room instead. Barely. The house groaned all night, settling sounds that felt intentional, deliberate, like bones being adjusted. Matthew woke screaming. "The walls are leaning," he cried. They were, just slightly. By the second day, Agnes had sealed off rooms. Not locked, finished, doors closed, cracks stuffed, handles wrapped in cloth. "These are complete," she said softly. Mrs. Holt tried to open one. Agnes grabbed her wrist hard enough to bruise. "You don't interrupt a preparation," she snapped. Then just as quickly, she softened. "I'm sorry. I forget you're new." Mrs. Holt confronted her. "Who are you, really?" Agnes sighed and finally sat down. "I'm what comes before," she said. "I stay so the house doesn't rush." "Rush what?" Agnes looked at Matthew. "Loss." That afternoon, Mr. Holt collapsed. No warning, no illness. He simply sat down and didn't stand back up, breathing shallow, eyes unfocused. Agnes knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "Good," she whispered. The house chose gently. Mrs. Holt screamed. Agnes placed a blanket over Mr. Holt's legs. "Not yet," she said. "It's rude to cover the face too early." The truth came in fragments. This house was not haunted, it was expectant, built in a place where people came to die slowly. Hospice, plague home, war shelter. Death lingered long enough to soak into the structure. The house learned the pattern. Now, when families arrived, it waited until Agnes came. "She prepares it so it doesn't take everyone at once," Agnes explained. "You'd be surprised how impatient houses can be." Mrs. Holt shook violently. "You let people die." Agnes shook her head. "No," she said. "I keep them human until the end." That night, Agnes dressed the house. Curtains drawn, floors cleaned obsessively, candles placed but not lit. Matthew asked quietly, "Who dies next?" Agnes hesitated. "That depends," she said gently, "on who lets go first." Mrs. Holt tried to escape. The door opened easily. Outside, the street was wrong. Flat, silent, no houses, just fog. Agnes stood behind her. "You can't leave before it finishes," she said. "That's how it follows you." Mrs. Holt stepped back inside. The door shut. Mr. Holt died at dawn, peacefully. Agnes closed his eyes, covered his face. The house sighed. Walls relaxed. One room reopened. Matthew cried until his voice broke. Agnes knelt beside him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am." He looked up at her. "Do you die too?" Agnes smiled sadly. "Eventually," she said, "but not here." The final choice came that evening. Agnes packed her bag. "The house is almost done," she said. Mrs. Holt stared at her. "You're leaving us?" Agnes nodded. "One of you remains," she said. "That's the agreement." Matthew screamed. "No!" Agnes knelt in front of him. "You'll forget," she promised. "Children always do." Mrs. Holt understood then. The house wasn't choosing randomly. It was choosing who would stay with it. Mrs. Holt made her decision. "I'll stay," she said. Agnes closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you," she whispered. The house shuddered at approval. Morning came. Matthew woke alone. The house felt normal, quiet, empty. The front door was unlocked. Agnes was gone. Years later, Matthew would remember very little. Just a house, a maid in black, in the feeling of being gently prepared for something he never fully saw. The house stands occupied to this day. Families move in, live long lives, because sometimes if you're very lucky, the maid comes first.